Good day, everyone. Welcome to another Live with Kevin, which will eventually also be another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. If you're here with us live, welcome. If you are here with us live, I hope you will take a second to go into the comments in whatever social platform you're watching from and say hello and tell us where you're located. And that'll be really, really great. And then you'll know who else is here. I'll know who else is here. And I'll get you used to commenting because while you're here, I want you to imagine that you're joining my guest and I for a cup of coffee. And so if you were around a table with the two of us, if you had a question, you'd ask it, right? If you had a comment, you'd share it. If you had an idea, you'd introduce it. So I want you to do that here as well. When you do that, this will be a more interactive conversation. When you do that, you will get more from this conversation. And if you do that, eventually we'll have a better podcast episode. So, and not only that, if you participate today for the first time ever on one of these lives, I think, if you participate, you'll have a chance to win a copy of the book we're talking about today. How about that? So I'm not above bribing you, as it turns out. So before we get started and clip this for what will be the podcast, one more thing to tell you, and that is I'd like you to go to your calendar on September the 20th and 21st. I'd love for you to join us for what we call Virtual LeaderCon. Virtual LeaderCon is a 2-day virtual event where I will bring 13 different leadership experts to join me in conversations, not completely like, but not completely unlike what you're about to experience here. And you'll have a chance to win a lot of valuable prizes. You'll have a chance to engage with a community on an extremely wonderful platform that we use for those events. You can learn more about that and register for free at virtualleadercon.com. I'll put that on the screen real quick. Virtualleadercon.com. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move that off of there. And then I'm going to do the countdown, which for the podcast, which will start here shortly. And so, Marissa, this is for you in 3, 2, 1. Would you like to create the life you want? Sounds like a good question. What if I told you you could do that in the next 12 months? Today is about 5 principles that can accelerate your progress towards your desired future. Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively, make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. And if you're listening to this podcast, you could have been with us live. Well, you could be with us for future live episodes is probably a better way to say that. And you can find out when they happen by joining one of our groups. You can join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to find out when those lives take place so you can participate. And if you would have been with us today, well, you might have had a chance to win a copy of our book today. More on that in a minute. Let me now introduce you to, one more thing. Today's episode is brought to you by our new book, The Long Distance Team, Designing a Team for Everyone's Success. You can learn more by going to longdistanceteambook.com. Hope you'll do that. Longdistanceteambook.com, where you can learn more about the book, get an excerpt, and more. Hope you'll do that now. Without further ado, let me introduce our guest. Her name is Wendy Leshgold. And let me tell you a little about her before we get started. She is the co-author of the brand new book, Fast Forward, 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. She's the co-founder and president of the Fast Forward Group, a professional development and executive coaching company that has transformed the careers and lives of more than 100,000 professionals at leading companies around the world, including Amazon, TikTok, Google, JP Morgan Chase, Ford, and more. She has designed a simple and immediately actionable system of power principles to help people achieve success and fulfillment in their whole lives. Wendy, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for
Glad
having
that
me,
you're
Kevin.
here. Yeah, so those that are here live saw your co-author's name, Lisa McCarthy, here. That's not who is here, but I'm so glad that it's you, Wendy, and that we were able to do this. So first of all, congrats on this new book, your first
Thank
book,
you.
right?
Thank you. Yes, it
Um,
is.
and it's an exciting time. And as we're doing this live, it's not quite out yet. And when we first release the podcast, it will have been out for 1 month. So it's very exciting. And I'm so glad that you're here as a part of that journey. So tell us a little bit about how you end up writing this book. A little bit. I mean, you probably didn't wake up when you were 5 and say, I'm going to write a book someday
Yes.
about achieving the life that you want. So,
Yeah.
like, tell us a little bit about the journey that leads you to this
Yeah.
moment.
Okay. Well, I would have to start with my co-author, Lisa, and just tell you about how we came to start the company that enabled us to come up with the goods, if you will, to actually write the book. And Lisa and I met when we were in sleepaway camp together when we were 10 years old. And always, just kind of stayed friends for many years and dreamed of someday working together. And we kind of had our careers on parallel tracks. We both got married. We both had families. We lived on opposite coasts of the country. And then in about 2013, we both were at sort of a crossroads in our careers. Both kind of she was coming out of big corporate sales jobs. I had spent many years of my career working for big advertising agencies in New York and then in LA, and then had my own coaching practice on my own for a number of years. And then we just both were at this inflection point of looking at what's next and said to ourselves, looked at each other in the eye over Skype, because
I
that's
was
what
going to say, were you actually out over
her from New York, me from Los Angeles, looked at each other virtually in the eye and said, you know what? We always said we were going to work together. I think this is the moment. Like this is the moment where we're going to actually do it. And with that, we decided it was time to take a passion that we both had, which was about really helping people to really fuel their own success and happiness at work, but also in their whole life at the same time. And the fast forward company was sort of started with this notion that you don't have to put your life on hold to be successful, that you can crush it in your career, achieve big goals, things that are important to you, but also just have a great life and be happy and not be feeling like you're sacrificing and putting things like kind of for later. And we were fortunate enough we wrote a really great curriculum. Well, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that because a lot of it's in the book. And then we were fortunate enough that our first client, and this is back in 2013, was Facebook, who was in a place in their business that their people were really excited to be there. The company had gone public not that long before, and their people were really excited to be there. They wanted to give it all and be successful in their careers, but there was a really, really strong likelihood that they were going to really burn out. And will they last? Will they stay?
right?
And I think with that as something that was really at stake, their leadership brought us in to work with their teams, and that was a big break for us. From there, we were able to build our business, grow, work with lots and lots of other clients. And over the years, one of the things that always kind of struck us was it's really great to be able to work with all these people from these big companies that are bringing us in to work with them. But what about everybody else? Number one. And number two, after we leave, after we've spent time working with these people, what can we do to give them a reminder of what
Right.
they learned so that
Right.
they can keep coming back to it every single year? And we, said to ourselves, it's never going to happen until we write a book. And that
And
is
now
where
we
that
have the book.
and
So
that is where that idea came from.
in
Right.
the in the open of this podcast, I talked about something, and it's in the subtitle of the book. It's a bold promise. Oops, I've got the wrong thing. It's a bold promise that you make, right?
Yeah.
And so you said that we can create the life we want in just 1 year.
Yeah.
So okay, it's fine as a marketer to have a bold promise. It's a great subtitle for the book. And quite honestly, it's what got me to take another look inside.
Yeah.
So all of that's great. But like, how can you tell us that you can deliver on that promise? I mean,
Yeah.
we have to do the work. I
Yeah.
realize that. But like, give me some reason why we should
Yeah.
believe that you can make this promise.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. And I think first of all, I want to just say that having done this work with over 100,000 people over the last 11 years, we have the proof is in the pudding. That's so first of all, it's happened over and over and over again with people from all different walks of life, different life stages, different career phases, different organizations. And so we've seen it happen. So we know that it's possible. So if you could sort of say to yourself, okay, it's possible, then the question is, well, how is it possible? And it really begins with there's two things I think to think about there. One is if you can agree that a lot of the time, most of us are going through our life sort of like we're very busy people with a to-do list that we are, clutching to, hoping that if we could just get through it, we can make it through the week, somehow maybe have a cocktail on Friday night and, just sort of collapse over the weekend and then we'll just sort of get at it again next year. And, there's not a lot of intentionality in that kind of, rhythm, if you will. And when people tend to be the most thoughtful and the most effective is when they're being really, really intentional about what's important to them. And people tell us all the time, well, writing a bold vision, being intentional, it sounds great, but I don't have time for that. I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got a list. I've got my children. I've got my life and all these things going on. And we will say to them, okay, can you buy that you have enough time for what's really important to you? If you could just figure out first what that is. And that is where we begin.
Right. We'll get to that in a second. And we're going to talk about these five power principles in a second. But I want to talk something about that word power,
Yes.
because you talk about it in the book. And I agree with you that like there's a lot of stuff that we attach to that word.
Yeah.
And so why that word?
Yeah.
And because it was intentional for you to use that word,
Very.
why that word?
Yeah.
And if, especially if someone is pausing a bit as they hear us use that word, why shouldn't they?
Yeah. That's a great question. And we don't use the word power as like an aggressive thing in the book. Power is really about the power that you have over your own life. Right. And I think a lot of times people underestimate the power they have over their life and what it is that they can control. And at the end of the book, and this is not a spoiler, but at the very end of the book, we reference the Wizard of Oz. I don't know if you saw that at the
Yeah.
very, very end. We talk a little bit about the Wizard of Oz and how in the Wizard of Oz, at the very end, the Good Witch says to Dorothy, "You've had the power all along." And this is very, very much an essential human condition, is that we oftentimes are unconscious to the power that we have over our lives, over what we can control. And I think we give it away so easily, saying, "Oh, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I don't have control over that." But if you slow down and really think about the power that you do have, the control that you do have, it's a lot.
It is a
And
lot.
it's a place to start.
And I want to connect that to something you already said, which is the idea of being intentional, because I think that deep in our psyche, we know we have that power. And I think some people are a little scared of
Yeah,
that power.
yeah,
But I think the way we unleash it is two things. One is, you've already said it, intentionality. Like I'm going to intentionally use this power. And then the second thing is I've got to know how to direct it. And that's what I think the five principles do, the five power
yes.
principles. So I'm just going to say them all real quickly, and then I'm going to let you pick one that you want us to. We don't have time, obviously, to unpack them all. So I'm going to let you pick one. I'm just going to tell you what the five are. So they are: declare a bold vision, choose a new perspective, plan the work and work the plan, use the language of action, and stop talking and get curious. So I didn't tell
Yes.
you I was going to give you this choice, but
Yeah,
which
no.
one do you want us to talk about?
That is an easy choice for me, and I'm gonna say we should start where we always start, which is in declare a bold vision. And you forgot the last three words, which are and share it.
And share
And
it.
share
Correct.
it
Thank
because
you.
there's massive power in that. And the vision is the foundation of our system. It is really the foundation, and all the other power principles are in service of making that vision become a reality. So it's always a great place to start. And I think one of the things that's so fundamental about this power principle is the first word, declare. And people don't like to use that word, even though I think most of us intellectually know that there's huge power in visioning, in writing down our aspirations, in dreaming big, right? We all know that. And there's like statistics about it. You're 42% more likely to accomplish something just by writing it down. And yet, people don't like to declare, and it is because it's scary. It means you're putting something out there. You might fail. People will hold you accountable. You might seem, people, it's vulnerable because you're telling people what you actually care about. And that is a vulnerable thing, especially if you don't accomplish it. I mean, we put in our vision for several years that we were going to write a book, and we failed several times before we wrote it. That's okay. Human beings tend to be super risk averse. We all are risk averse. And it's actually, there's so much brain science behind why we're risk averse. It's not because we are, negative people or afraid. There's nothing wrong with us. It's just we are risk averse because we are wired to play it safe for our survival, right? That's like a survival instinct from the past. And yet it doesn't help us thrive today to play it safe in that way. And I think the first step in declaring a bold vision is saying to yourself, like, I am willing to think about my future and write things down for myself that I may not know how to make it happen at this current moment in the present, right? I'm going to write something down that I would love to make happen. It's not going to be a fantasy, but it's going to feel a little uncomfortable, might be a little bit bold. And I may not know the whole path to making it happen, and I'm going to write it anyway. And that is really key and fundamental to declaring a bold vision.
Yeah, I mean, you can't create the life you want if you don't know what the life you want is, and that's the
Yeah.
vision piece, right?
Yes.
So I fully expected we would
Yes.
start there, and we needed to do
Yes.
that, of course.
Yes.
The one that I want us to talk about, how about that? Well, actually, I'm going to read you. First, I'm going to read you a quote
Great.
from the book, and have you
Great.
comment on that, and then I want to talk about one of the 5 that I particularly love and want us to dive into a little bit. So, but here's a quote. It's on page 75. I'm not expecting you to remember it. I'm going to read it. It says, "You have zero control over other people and many circumstances, but you have 100% choice in your perspective." It's in a chapter, which I love the title of, Stories Your Brain Makes Up and What They Cost You.
Yes.
So I'm a big believer in this idea of
Yes.
what we can control, what we can only influence, and all that stuff. And so I'll read it again and let you comment on it.
Yeah.
You have zero control over other people and many circumstances, but you have 100% choice in your perspective.
Yeah.
What do you mean, and why is that so important?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, you want to think about, well, where is that costing you in your life, right? So, I actually think, like, the reason that this chapter on, the stories your brain makes up and what they're costing you, the reason that this chapter comes right after the chapter on writing your bold vision is because this is what can and will, and for most people does, get in the way of achieving success and happiness in their life, because we make up stories about ourselves, other people, and our circumstances, and we believe them to be true, even though they often are not. They're not rooted in fact. And I'll, one could say a fact is that that it's raining. That's a fact. And a perspective about that is, it is a gray and dismal day.
It's a crappy day because it's raining.
Exactly. So we may say, yeah, it's a dismal day. Yeah, that's a fact. But if we're rigorous about our thinking, it is not. And that applies to so many things. And there's lots of stories in the book to help bring this to life for people. And I think that when we're writing, even when you're writing your vision, even when you're writing it, forget about actually trying to execute on it. Even when you're writing it, oftentimes we won't even write certain things because we believe that we believe some story about it, and we say to ourselves, like, that's not never going to happen for me. That will never happen. That will never work at my company. Right. So let's say you want to write something about the culture of your team, or you want to write something about your relationship with your manager. Right. Then just taking it into the professional domain. You may say, oh, I can't write that my manager supports me and is helping me to move, up the chain, because my manager is an egotistical jerk and only cares about themselves. Right. That is not a fact. That is a story that you may tell yourself, and there's a cost in believing it. And the cost is not relevant to the manager. It's relevant to you.
To
So it's always
you,
kind of like,
100%.
look for where is the suffering, and therein lie those stories that we are believing to be true. And so that is sort of one of the first things we help people with is, how do I choose a new perspective? Because I think it's one thing to sort of, the first step is recognizing, well, where are the negative stories? Second step is, what are they costing me to believe them?
Yeah.
And then the third step, which is the most fun part of it, maybe the most challenging for some people, which is, how could I choose another one? Right? Where you said in the quote, you have 100% choice. This is where the choice comes in.
Right. When I work with groups of usually leaders, but when I work with groups of people, I often will share a couple of my perspectives right up front. I said, like, listen, you need to know this is where Kevin's coming from, right? You can agree or disagree with this, but that's where I'm coming from. And one of the things I say is, like, I believe that 95% of the people, 95% of the time, want to do great work. It's not everybody, it's not every single day, but it's all of us, the predominant amount of us, most of the time, want to do great work. And if we start from that place, it changes the way we lead.
Yeah.
If we don't start from that place,
Yeah.
or if you say, well, yeah, except for Bobby, Kevin, I got this Bobby, like whatever, like,
Yeah.
then we got, call it perspective, call it mindset, call it whatever you want to call it. But the reality is that it shapes.
I love that. I love that
Our thoughts
example. A
shape
great example. Yeah.
our
Sometimes,
beliefs shape
Kevin,
our thoughts
sometimes
and
we
shape our
call it
actions.
like it's a pair of glasses, like you can put them on and you can take them off. And if you look through the lens of people want to do great work, you're going to see things and do things that you would not see and do if you had a different pair of glasses that said, people are out to get me, people
100%.
are lazy, people are just checked out, or they're phoning it in. That's going to be a very different reality.
100%.
Yeah.
So of the 5 principles, and the power principles, of the 5 power principles, certainly we have to start by talking about the vision. And I apologize for not having the share it part on there. We could unpack that, but I want to go somewhere else, because of the 5, just reading them, the one that people might say, you need to tell me more about that one, happens to be perhaps my favorite. And that is, use language of action. And I specifically want to talk about something about this, but, like, just tell us what you and Lisa
Hmm.
mean by this.
Yeah. Well, I think when we think about our speaking, a lot of times you might focus on, I'm going to use this word, or I'm going to use this term, but there's a lot of fuzziness in types of speaking. And one of the things we do in this book is we give people distinctions in the types of speaking that will have different impacts when you use them. So we are distinguishing language of action from other types of language, which doesn't mean it's always better, right? There's value in all different types of speaking, but we're drawing this distinction so that you have power in the influence and how, when you're communicating, and the impact that you have on other people. And the I don't know, Kevin, if you picked up on, we use this metaphor of a football game and people in a football stadium.
Yep.
To frame this whole power principle. And the metaphor is, if you imagine yourself sitting in a football stadium and you're a fan in the stands at the football stadium.
You know that there are a lot of people right now that are like, I'm so ready for that, right? It's just a week or 2 away, depending on whether you're
We are
thinking about
almost there. I know
You're almost there.
my son is spending a lot, my 18-year-old son is spending a lot of his time on his fantasy team right now. But if you imagine yourself in the stands, and I said to you, well, what kind of speaking happens when you are a fan in the stands at the football stadium? You would say things like cheering, booing, analysis, praise, forecasting or like predicting what's going to
Mhm.
happen, right? Somebody, when I ask this question, somebody always invariably says drinking. And then I have to remind them that that is not a type of speaking.
That is not a word. That is a word, but
It's
that
a word, but it is not a type of speaking. It's an action.
well,
Anyway, so
depending on how much you've drank, it might change the way you speak, but that's not what you're talking
no,
about.
but literally, I can't tell you how often that comes up. Anyway, so all of those types of speaking, the booing, the praising, the forecasting, the educating, all of that is valuable. And yet, when you think about the action happening on the field, does any of that literally move the ball down the field on this field? And the answer is no. So then the next question is, well, what does? What moves the ball down the field? And so if you kind of put football to the side for a minute, we make an assertion that there's really three major types of language that do. One of them is articulating a desired outcome for a conversation, which we define as what will people believe, think, and do at the end of the conversation. That's number one. Number two, making recommendations, like literally saying to people, this is what I think you should do, and here's why, because then they might actually do it. And the third is making requests. Will you do X or Y? These things sound so simple. And yet, oftentimes, we are going into conversations, educating, informing, criticizing, or praising without making a recommendation, without making a request, without setting a desired outcome. And then we're wondering, hey, wait a minute, nothing happened in that conversation.
Because
Why?
all of these create action, yes, but they all require clarity. The first thing that you
Yes.
said is so much of our language, especially when we're not thinking about it, is fuzzy, is unclear, is not fully elucidated, and so the idea here is about the language of action, but it requires clarity, which is where you started here, which is what I think is so valuable. So
Yeah.
I love all three of those pieces, but
Yeah,
it's
and then
chapter
and
12.
Kevin, one more thing I would say
Yeah.
about setting desired outcomes, and I think this is like a really interesting way of thinking about it. Oftentimes you're going into conversations, you're not really clear. You're setting an agenda of like what you want to say, but you actually aren't really being thoughtful of like when we finish this conversation, what will the other person, what will they think? What will they really believe? And then by consequence, what will they do? That's very similar to writing a bold vision. It's almost like a mini vision for a conversation. And the power in that to influence behavior and to actually make things happen is just, it accelerates things. It's just sort of exponential speed. And you asked me at the beginning of the conversation, how do you do this in a year? Well, the reason that there's five power principles and not just one, right? One would be just, write your bold vision, which in and of itself has massive value. But you need the other four to like, okay, now you're going to need everything in the toolkit to make it happen. And this one is huge because you need other people to achieve all your goals.
Yeah, and so you saw that I put on the screen there. Desired outcome is the chapter I wanted to talk about a little bit more, and you've just done some of that. The thing is that whether it's a conversation, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a meeting, and in fact, I've I've been teaching people how to have more effective meetings for a very long time. I'll just leave it at that. And that's literally the phrase that we use
Great.
is write a desired outcome. What's the desire? How will we know this meeting is over?
Yeah.
When this has been accomplished, we're done. And the thing that we teach in that particular regard is to make it clearest, it's noun, verb, past tense. When this budget approved, when the budget's approved, we're done. We didn't come here to talk about the budget. We came here to approve a budget. And so and also with a conversation, which is where you framed it to start with and where you frame it in the book, is like, where are we trying to get to?
Yeah.
The idea of being clear about a desired outcome is so
It's huge.
powerful.
It's
And I
huge.
love your point about it's like a mini vision.
It's
I
like a
love
mini vision. But I will say this, and I love your example of like the budget will be approved at the end of the meeting. One build on that is if for the people in the meeting to say yes to the budget, what would they have to believe?
exactly.
Because if you just go in there guns a-blazing with your agenda of why you think it should be there, and you're not thinking, okay, I want to stand in their shoes. What would they have to truly believe for them to say yes to this budget? Because once you figure out what do they care about,
Yep.
what's going to be important to them, then you're going to know, well, what do I have to say in this meeting to be able to get the budget approved? So it's not just about me, it's about them. And I think that's also extremely
100%. So,
important.
and in a conversation, that's what it's all about, right? Like, so
Oh,
that this becomes the underlying, the underpinning of influence, and all of that starts by changing our perspective about what we're doing here. It's
yeah,
not about a topic; it's
yeah,
about an outcome. It's about
yeah,
where are we trying to get to
yeah,
together. It's right on. It's one of the reasons I like the book
yeah,
so
yeah,
much. Now, this is a book that, by all, you know, by many standards, those who might have been listening to this podcast before might say, well, it's a really interesting conversation, Kevin, but this is a leadership podcast. Why this book? And I want to answer the first part, then I'm going to turn it to you. And the first part is, well, as leaders, we are also humans. And so it applies to us from a personal and professional development perspective.
yeah,
But I'd like you to talk about it for a
yeah,
second from the perspective of,
yeah.
how do we use these ideas as a leader with others?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I'm so glad that you asked me that question. What we found is that often, and I think you mentioned this earlier, people want to do great work. Teams want to do great work. They really want to know, they really want to do what the leader and what the manager wants them to do, if only they always knew what that was,
But
right?
they often don't. It's not in their job
But they
description to
often
read
don't.
your mind, right?
Right. So if you are a person working on a team and everyone on the team, and there's transparency about what are the bold ambitions of this team, right? So, like, first, let's put it in the perspective of the actual leader of the team. When the leader of a team has a bold vision for 12 months from now, this is what success looks like for this team. This is what we're going to be known for. These are the outcomes that we will have accomplished. Here's why it matters to us. This is what difference it's going to make. Here's what our relationships will look like within this organization, externally outside of this organization. And then everyone on the team knows what that vision is and they understand why it's important. Then guess what? Everyone else on the team can say, ah, now I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm inspired by that vision. And now I can write mine because mine will ladder up to that one. And when you have
Creating the
everybody
alignment that
marching
we
in
must have.
step,
Right?
yeah, it's just like game changing. And that is what we have seen in the organizations that we've worked with, because oftentimes, especially in really fast paced organizations where the only constant is change, having this North Star is essential and has made a massive difference in the lives of so many people. The other thing I would say too is one of the things that, and I've heard this over and over again throughout my career, is I really want to get to know people in my organization, and we're going to have to go out for drinks like every Friday in order to really get to know each other so I can understand who they are as a person. Writing a bold vision for your whole life and sharing it with people that you work with accelerates that process of getting to know each other as human beings 10x. 10x. I mean, you don't have to go to 10 happy hours to get to know everybody.
Well, and it deepens the connection.
Totally.
So we can have a great connection around our favorite college football team, right? Or your favorite, different than
Yeah.
my favorite, or whatever. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. But talking about this, about stuff that matters, about who we are and what we want to create for ourselves, deepens that,
Yeah.
creates a level of interaction that supersedes a lot of the rest of those things.
Yeah. And it's vulnerable. It is vulnerable to share what matters to you. The first question in that exercise asks, what are you known for? And that's a very heartfelt question to say. It's a year from today. What would I love to be known for? And maybe it's different than what I'm currently known for. I would say that one of the things that I love to be known for is being somebody who is patient, calm, and is open to new ideas. And if you said to me, okay, Wendy, like, and I bring that to life in my vision a little bit. But somebody who's reading my vision or who I'm reading it to might say, well, how is that different than you're known now? Like, why does that matter to you? That's going to open up a very profound conversation and really have them get to know me on a very deep level and also have them want to support me and want to hold me accountable, right? Because if I say to them, well, gosh, I'm very impatient, right? People don't know me right now as being patient, which, by the way, that is true about me. I am always working on this. This is my, holy grail for
Yeah.
me, is being known as being patient. But I can say to people, I want to be known as patient. So if I interrupt you, or if you see me shifting gears or taking you on a tangent, please tell me, because that's
Yeah.
not who I want to be.
Yep. 100%. That's correct. That's right on in terms of changing the level of relationship across the team, but also as a leader with our team, right? So you can think about that either way. You can think about that outside of work, of course, as well. So I'm going to shift gears since you just said that. I'm going to shift gears, get 3 or 4 more things to do real quick. And you know what? I said, Wendy, I said I was going to give away a book. And you know what? We've got no commentary. So here's what I'm going to do instead. Here's what I'm going to do. So all of you that are listening to this podcast, if when you listen to this, and this is going to obviously favor the people who would listen early, right? This is going to be released on the 5th of October. So if you are hearing these words before the end of October of 2023, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to LinkedIn. I want you to connect with me and say, I listened to your great conversation with Wendy, and I want to win a copy of Fast Forward. And I have the hardcover one that I'm going to send to somebody, but you got to do that. If you do that, and of course, if you're with us live, you can do that now, and I'll put you on that list. And I'm going to give away a copy of this on November the 1st, 2023. So there you go, everybody. That's what you can do. I've got 3 more questions for you, Wendy. The first one is, what do you do for fun?
Huh. Well, it's funny. If you had asked me that question 10 years ago, when I first started Fast Forward, I would have been like really challenged to even answer that question. But I have spent a lot of time writing my bold vision every year, thinking about what is important to me personally outside of work. And I love spending time with my husband. We are almost empty nesters. We have 1 more year to go. Love to go
I heard
see
you say 18, so
Yeah,
you're close.
he's in his senior year of high school and he's my third. We love to go see live music. We actually actually last night went and saw Darius Rucker. It's really a great concert. I don't really know Darius Rucker very well, but now I do. So we love to go to see live music. And where I live in LA, I literally walking distance from my house. I can go hiking. So I love to do that and I prioritize that. And I just want to say, you asked me that question just to get to know me probably, but it's a good question for people to ask themselves, like, what do I like to do for fun? And write it down so that you remember to do it. Because sometimes in our
Are you doing it? Right. There's
are
a
you
list,
doing
but
it?
am I doing it?
Because that's like, time can pass by and life is short. And, the more intentional that you can be about fun, the more fun you're going to have.
Shockingly profound right there, Wendy. So we're talking about your book, but I want to hear what you're reading or have been reading lately.
Okay. So I am going to tell you what I'm reading, and this is going to sound very non-intellectual. But 2 weekends ago, I drove from Seattle to Los Angeles with my daughter, and it's almost 20-hour car ride. So we split up into 2 days, and we listened to Tom Lake, which is Ann Patchett's new book that is brilliantly read on the audio version by Meryl Streep. It was fantastic. It was also fantastic to listen to it on a 20-hour car ride. And for me, fiction is my escape. I love storytelling. I love to kind of be reminded of people's lives and feelings and thoughts. So, I do read a lot of nonfiction, have to do that for my work, but I prioritize fiction. I'm in a book group, and Tom Lake was my book Club
There you
book.
go, everybody. We will have a link to that, both the book and the audiobook, since that's
I
how
mean,
you read it.
Meryl
We'll have links to
Streep
that in the
doesn't get much better than that. I don't know how it was that Ann Patchett got Meryl Streep to do her audiobook, but bravo to her. It was incredible.
chances are she wrote a check, is what I'm guessing. Don't know that. That's just a guess, everybody. Kevin has no inside information. So where can we learn more, Wendy, about the book, about you and Lisa's work, about how people can get connected with you? Where can we learn more?
Okay, so you can go to our website, which is fastforwardgroup.net. That is where you can purchase the book. There's a tab on the website that says Fast Forward and says book. And you can, if you're interested in sort of more thought leadership, ideas, videos, things like that, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Wendy Leshgold, and love to engage Kevin with your people.
Fastforwardgroup.net, everybody. Now, before we go, I have a question for all of you. It's a question I ask here every single week. It's a 2-word question. Now what? What are you going to do as a result of this? Because it's one thing to say, yeah, writing a vision is a good idea. Sharing it with others, good idea. I like that. But what are you going to do? What action are you going to take as a result of being here? I could go through my list of things that I wrote down, but none of that matters. The only thing that matters is what you're going to do. And if you don't take action based on this question, then this might have been enjoyable. Hope it was. It might have even been entertaining. Hope it was. But it won't change your work and your life. And that's what this podcast is about. That's what this book is about. So I hope that you will ask yourself that question, now what? And then take action on your answer.
Great question. Love that question.
I ask it every single week. And so, speaking of every single week, we're here every week. So why aren't you here every week? If you've just found our podcast, hope you'll continue. If you have been following, watching, listening to the podcast, I hope that you will give us a rating, and I hope that you'll just invite others to join us, because again, we're here every week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.